I'm going to take questions at the end. If you do have any questions, then feel just please pop them in the Q&A section. Let me open that up as well. I will be doing that at the end of the session today. But if you do have any questions as we go along or at the end, then feel free to post them. So hello and welcome everyone to Going Off Map. And today I'm going to be talking about Megagames with a reduced or absent wargaming element. So who am I? I am Becky Ladley. You may know me as BeckyBecky. I've been a Megagamer since 2014. I'm the designer of Everybody Dies, the Game of Thrones Megagame, and Trope High, the American High School Megagame. I am a blogger about Megagames and various other immersive gaming events over at BeckyBecky Blogs, and I'm currently chair for Pennine Megagames. So if you've been to a Megagame before, you have probably seen something that looks a bit like this. If you've only started Megagaming more recently, you've probably seen something that looks like this. And then finally, you've probably also seen something that looks a bit like one of these. Maps and units are a key component of many Megagames. I would say the overwhelming majority of Megagames. And before I go any further, can I just say that's not a bad thing. I've been to many Megagames with maps and had a fantastic time. I've written a Megagame with a map, Everybody Dies. And I think that there is always going to be a place in the Megagaming community for Megagames with maps in. So I'm not suggesting that we replace that, far from it. Today, I'm just looking at the growing subgenre of games that have not got a map in them. But to consider why, how these games can exist, I think we need to start by looking at why Megagames do have maps. So firstly, Megagames have their origins in the wargaming community, and maps are a very important part of wargaming. So naturally, when they made the transition and moved and Megagames emerged, maps came with it. A lot of the topics that Megagames are run on currently require maps as part of the concept. So operational military games, where a specific battle or campaign is being fought. Historical political games or geopolitical games, where nations are conflicting with each other. Or even completely different games, such as kids running around a haunted mansion or gangs controlling a city. In all of these games, geography matters, so maps are part of that. Maps are a very useful display of game state within a game. They're very visual and interactive, and all players can use them to get a quick and easy insight into what the current status of the game is. Maps are a very useful framework to start building your game around. There are, when you start designing a game, often you'll start with your map game, you'll look at the inputs and the outputs of that game, how long things will take on the map to determine your turn length, and they're a good structure to bolt other mechanics onto. And finally, maps really create an atmosphere at a game. I remember when I got my Everybody Dies map, that was when it really felt like I was designing a mega game. And when you walk into a room with a big map in it, it just adds something, adds to the experience. And the fact that there are so many reasons to have maps in a mega game means that there are challenges if you come to thinking about how you remove them. And I'm going to look at a few of those challenges now. So the first thing we're going to consider is the map as a framework for the game. You can't just remove a map from a game and have nothing fill its place. What you need to do is create a new core mechanic to replace it. And to come up with this can be very challenging, but I do also think that it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to be creative and come up with something new or experimental. Now, this mechanic doesn't need to be something that every single player at your game will interact with, because not every single player at a mega game will interact with the map game. But there are a few things you need to bear in mind when coming up with this new core mechanic. It needs to have, like a map game, multiple inputs and outputs that you can hinge other mechanics onto. If you've got a main resource that the majority of players are accumulating or spending, it should definitely key into that. And other resources that are in your game should key into it in some way as well. You need to consider how they're all going to tie into your core mechanic. And if there are any additional cards or buffs or anything else like that that players could gain over the course of the day, then it's a good idea to work out how they will affect your core mechanic as well. The actual mechanic you'll use will depend on the game. So for example, this picture is from It Belongs in a Museum by Jake, Ricardo and Danielle. This was an Indiana Jones themed game, and their core mechanic was these quests. Most players went on a quest every turn, and this here is what the quest looked like. It was a sheet of paper with various challenges you had to do at different stages, and control facilitated you going through it. Now, you don't have to have a single mechanic to replace the map. You could have more than one. For example, at Trope High, I'd say that there were two core mechanics that replaced it. There was the clique mechanic, which was a series of mini games around the room that every player took part in once a turn. And then there was also the night action. This functioned similarly to a closed map, whereby players gave control orders, control took them behind the screen to resolve. Now, at a map game, what was behind the screen would have been a map, but because Trope didn't have a map, it was a grid of players that we pinned the orders to before resolving them. And I'm going to touch a little bit more on atmosphere later, but these core mechanics are a great way to add atmosphere to your game as well. So this is again from It Belongs in a Museum, and at the end of each puzzle quest, there was a dexterity or puzzle game that you had to complete. This really added to the wacky adventuring vibe. Although you can't imagine at the end of a quest Indiana Jones having to solve a ball puzzle, you can definitely see where that idea has come from, and it really added something to the day for me. The next challenge I'd like to look at is displaying the game state. And this is something where map-free games will definitely struggle. Maps do a fantastic job of displaying the game state to lots of players and also being very interactive. The example that I've gone here for how a game has done it well is Draft Night 3077 by Peter Nixon and Trenton Greyoak. Their core mechanic that they replaced their map with was a drafting app, where players would select their draft picks over the course of the day, and the app would display them. And that was an effective way of allowing all the different players to see the picks and see the game state, and actually displaying far more complex information than you'd normally see at a physical game. But this was an online game, and it had that as an advantage. If you were trying to display that sort of information at a physical game, the equivalent would be putting up a sheet of paper at one end of the room and expecting all of the players to go over and look at it. That's just impractical. Whereas in an online game, you can have a dashboard that everyone has open. That's a really convenient way of displaying game state. In a physical game, things that you might use to replace a map for displaying game state is things like other types of game boards that aren't maps, so such as an economic tracker or a worker placement game. You might have a prestige tracker or a panic tracker or some other visible tracker at one end of the room. Or what you might do is lean more into your press team and give them ways they can be more accurate when they communicate the game state to other players. The next challenge I'd like to look at is atmosphere, and I'm cheating a little bit here because I don't think this is a challenge. Again, I think this is an opportunity. Maps are one way that you can create an atmosphere at your game, but they're far from the only way. So here we've got a picture from Blood and Thunder by Jim Wallman. And this is, you might call this a map, I would call it a game board. It is one of the ships at this pirate mega game. And there were 5 of them, and they really dominated the room. And as you can see, there was a little ship at the end of the table, there were sails along it, and it really just brought the game to life. Other ways you can add to the atmosphere, and these are things that games with maps also do, but other ways you can add to the atmosphere is creating clear costume guides that are easy for all players to get involved with. For example, at Trope High, I just told people that the school colour was orange, and I don't think I've ever seen as many people in one room wearing orange. You could also use signs or flags behind team tables, or you could get really creative with your use of components, such as getting 3D printed ones or specialist ones that really tie into your game theme. The final challenge I'd like to look at is the central conflict. Now, pretty much all mega games have some sort of central conflict. In an operational game, that will be the specific battle that's being fought. In a political game, it might be some sort of area control. There are other forms of conflict in Megagames with maps, such as political dominance or economic dominance, but generally speaking, some sort of geographical dominance is key. And again, I'm going to turn this into an opportunity by saying that this is a way to consider other conflicts that you can use within your game, stepping away from that military or area control conflict. For example, in Trope High, which is pictured here, most of the players were competing over completely different things. Things like class ranking or university acceptance, clique performance, such as getting the lead in the school play, or summoning Cthulhu and bringing about the end of days. Removing the reliance on some sort of military conflict forces you to think out of the box when coming up with the conflicts for your game. I'm just gonna have a drink. Next, I'd like to talk about some of the opportunities that I think there are in Megagames that don't have maps. And the first one of those is player roles. So most Megagames have both mechanics-focused players and role-play-focused players. Mechanics obviously aren't just on the map. They could be interacting with your trade game or your economy game, but a lot of those sort of roles will be found on the map. And at operational military games, the role types that you have at the game are almost exclusively mechanics focused roles, with a small number of role play focused roles up in the top levels of your hierarchy. And I'm not saying that we should be reducing the number of mechanics roles in games. There are lots of players out there who come to Megagames for those mechanics focused experiences, but there are also an awful lot of players who come along for the role play focused experiences. And if you are running operational military games that have that really, really heavy mechanics focus, I think it's also a good idea to balance out the games that you run by also running games that have a very heavy roleplay focus, like the majority of games without maps. So this example here is from Washington Conference by Dave Boundy, where I believe it was entirely roleplay characters, and the majority of players did not touch a real mechanic all day. Finally, and most excitingly, we've got theme diversity. So when Megagames first evolved from the wargaming community, I would say that they never imagined that there would be an American high school themed Megagame, and this is another picture from Trope High. The topics that Megagames cover are already broadening, including in ones that that still have a map in them. But I think that by removing the map, we can have more unusual games that break away from a focus on war and geopolitics. If you remove the requirement for Megagames to have a map to be defined as a Megagame, it really does open up the possibilities to all sorts of genres that currently don't make sense because they don't need a map. So on that note, I'd like to encourage everyone here to go off map. If you've got an idea for a game where you can't see where a map fits, or if you're designing a game with a map, but it's not quite working for some reason, at Trope High, I assumed I would have a map probably of the school in it for a really long time, and that actually came out of the game at a relatively late stage. So if you have got a design like that, just feel free to remove the map. Stay in the metagaming community, share your idea, and continue to broaden the experiences that we have available. And I, for one, am really looking forward to hearing all of the ideas that don't have a map in them. I'll now take any questions. Don't be shy. So Alex Beck has asked, aside from maps, are there any other traditional mechanics you think we can move beyond? That's a good question. I think there are a lot of mechanics that you would see in the majority of games. So things, or not the majority of games, a lot of games. So things like council games are typically done in one of two ways, either completely freeform or very, very mechanics focused. And I think that that could be explored a lot more. I think that economy games and trade games, as they currently are, again, appear in a lot of games. So I don't think we necessarily need to move beyond them, but I think that there are games that exist that don't have any of these sort of mechanics in. Andrew has asked, what do you feel has been the most successful implementation of a no map design, and why do you think it was as successful as it was? That's a good question. So when I was looking into this game, it was hard to find many games. So I think all the pictures that I included from this in this presentation were of the only sort of 5 games that I could actually find that don't have a map in them. I'd say that, I mean, not to toot my own horn, I think Trope did it very well and did it quite radically. I think that, honestly, I think all of the games that I've included did certain things really well in different ways. I think that, I think Washington Conference is a fantastic and very immersive game, considering it's about a very heavy subject matter. I think Blood and Thunder is a really fun pirate game. I think that Draft Night, I played in the first run of it, and it had some just sort of incredibly engaging moments where we sort of really came together as a team. So I couldn't pick just one, I guess, is the short answer there. I couldn't pick just one. I think they're all just so different. So I think that's a real, oh, I haven't even mentioned It Belongs in the Museum, which I also thought was brilliant. But yeah, I think they're all really, really good in their own ways. What's my next mapless game from anonymous attendee? So I do actually have a design that I'm working on at the moment, which is I've got a few actually. So I really like the idea of council games. I really like one idea that I've got is one that I've been talking about with Tim, which is a Tudor court or pseudo ahistorical Tudor court council game, where you are trying to put your heir on the throne, and that would be completely politics, but it would have a lot of mechanics in to make sure it wasn't just a LARP. It would be about strategizing and building up influence using mechanics, and then yeah. And I've also got another design, which is a super villain game where you are gaining assets from trading assets with various people and working with people to try and put into place various plans. And that does have a map in it, but it's more of a reference map that just has a few landmarks on. So you can have maps in games. This is more a talk about games where the map isn't the main component. Some of these games did have maps in them. It Belongs in a Museum did have a map in it, but it wasn't by any means a dominant part of the game. It wasn't used as a central map where you were spending a lot of your time. Is there a sub-game or concept or mechanic, this is from the Megagame Coalition, is there a sub-game or concept or mechanic you think would be a good Megagame mechanic, but you're not sure how it would work? If so, what is it? Oh, that's a very broad question. It's quite hard to answer. I'll have a think on that while I have a look at some of these other questions. Dave Boundy, a few early mega games were based on models rather than maps. How do you feel about models? Is this sort of, by models, do you mean the sort of miniatures, sort of, those sort of models? Can you clarify that, Dave? I'm not super hot on that genre of gaming. Large building models. That sounds interesting. So you were sort of moving units around. Was it sort of 3D? That sounds really cool. I would really like to go to a game like that. I think that's one of the things that so things like at Blood and Thunder, where you were moving around your ship, and that sort of was like, it had different parts of the ship and the sails and everything. I think that things like that are moving around the physical building. It would be a smaller scale than a lot of the mega games that we have, but I think that could be really interesting. And I'm suddenly getting ideas for things like John Maison's game Heist, where it's moving around, where you're breaking into a bank. If that's an online game, but you could bring that in real life by having an actual model of the bank that you're breaking into. I think I'm really liking that idea, to be honest. Let me just see if I've missed anything. Got one. I can't see who it's actually from. I just see M. I think it would be great to hear what ideas people have for going off map themselves. What do you think could be grown further? I'm not sure I understand, sorry. Is this any call for anyone else to share ideas? Because I would love to hear other people's ideas for settings that they have. I'm going to come back to this sub-game or concept or mechanic that you think would be a good mega game mechanic, but I'm not sure how it would work, because I do have loads of ideas, but I'm just blanking on them right now. I think honestly, anything that appears in any other sort of game would be interesting to see at a mega game. And I think that I was in the Assassin Society at my university, and we had Nerf guns, and I think having a Nerf gun mechanic at a game would be really fun. That would really appeal to me. I think it would be a different sort of mega game, and you need to tell attendees ahead of time, so any people who don't fancy the idea of being shot with a Nerf gun can opt out of that part of it, but I just think that would be really fun. Are there any more questions? Okay, Dave Boundy, is the dependence on geography that you're suggesting, or different? Is it the dependence on geography that you're suggesting, or different ways of representing things, or trying to break the mold? I think the point of this talk was sort of part of the general feeling that the more things we remove from being an implicit requirement in people's heads of being an important part of a mega game, the better, because then we get more creative designs. And I'm very much of the opinion of, if you want to call it a mega game, even if it doesn't necessarily fall into some people's definitions of it, then that's still cool, because it's still probably going to be a fun game. So when I was designing Trope High and I was like, oh, I think I'm going to take the map out, some people were like, I don't think that's a mega game anymore. And I think that's what I'm trying to break away from, the fact that if you want to design a game and it doesn't have a map in it, that still might be a mega game, and that's okay. And even if it's not a mega game, even if it doesn't turn out that way, it's still going to be a fun design thing, and I still think that should be being shared in these sort of spaces, because I still think it's the sort of thing that the same sort of people would enjoy, but possibly sort of like a Venn diagram, some mega gamers and people who are interested in other things would enjoy. So I think dependence on geography, I think it's part of it, but I just think broadening the what is a mega game up a little bit more is quite cool. Josh, the one mechanic I'm trying really hard to fit into a mega game is the brave/shy mechanic from the broom service. I have no idea what that is, but go for it. I'm sure it's a fun mechanic. I'm sorry, I've not heard of it. Yeah, we can continue to brainstorm these questions in Discord. So yeah, I'm not like, I very much want this to be a kickoff for more people to design mega games that don't have maps. So yeah, please start this as a see this as a conversation starter. Not necessarily off map, but shout out to Deep Haven for the player created map. Oh, there's a link there. I will open that up so that I can see that later. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to unmute people if people want to have more of a chat about this. I'm This is the longest I've ever just heard my own voice in one. That's not true. But yeah, feel free to unmute people, and I'm happy to turn this into more of a chat sesh. No one wants to chat with me. Yeah. So I think the conversation's dried up a bit. So if you do have any more thoughts about this, then please take it over to the Discord session on to the Discord chat. Would either of the Megagame Coalition people like to do a brief thing about what else is on the rest of today?
Yeah, I can. I think that Peter wants to unmute. So Peter, you'll need to unmute if you want to contribute. He raised his hand. In the meantime, and Josh, I don't know if you want to speak, but you're welcome to speak. Let me just do a rundown on the day here real quick. I gotta pull it up since we're on the fly here. And I did post this morning in the con chat or con links a little bit here about what's happening. So we have, after this, we have Wouldn't It Be Awesome, which is a session with Peter Nixon and a bunch of other people talking about mega games they'd love to see happen. So concepts or theming that they're really interested in. I will be later on also presenting on just a topic that not many people perhaps want to talk about, but the logistics of mega games, what it actually takes to run either a mega game and how we've done that at WCM as well as at MGC for Gen Con. So I'll speak a little bit to that. Mr. Mega Games at 2 p.m. Eastern time, we'll have a watch party to watch the second Shut Up and Sit Down video. And then the social deduction games will open at 3 p.m. And we do really encourage you, if you still have stamina and you're still awake, to join us at 5 p.m. today just for a final hurrah. That's kind of our closing out for the con. I would love to hear stories and just know how everybody's been doing, since I've been mostly at the panels and monitoring our Discord. So love to get those little insights into how things are going. I'm just going to quickly see here that whether or not Peter was able to mute and speak, but I think he's got out. I don't see him. So oh, Josh, I am in that boat too. Josh, I'm going to unmute you since I'd love to hear a little bit more about that shy mechanic, Becky, if you don't mind.
Yeah, totally.
And I apologize, my voice is so horrible here. I'm going to get my tea. All right, Josh, you're on.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Don't know. So yeah, so Broom Service is actually a game where it's kind of like Kiki's Delivery Service, where each of you is playing as a witch on a broom, and you are trying to work your way across a little map, and you're collecting potion ingredients and then creating potions and delivering them to towers. But the core mechanic of the game is that each round you get to select from, I think, 8 cards that each have an action on them. And these actions can be like, I want to move, or I want to collect ingredients, or I want to deliver, or I want to dispel this magical storm, or something like that. And then you select from that like 4 of them. And then the whole group of players comes together, and you sit in a circle, just like you would in most games. And one player is the first player. I don't remember exactly how they decide first player, but they then choose one of their action cards to play, and they have to choose whether they want to play it bravely, which basically means with risk, or shy, which means they just get the reward immediately. And so the shy reward is obviously usually very small, but it's something. And then the brave reward is much bigger, but after they go, the next person in order, if they have the same card, they also must play that action card and choose whether to play shyly or bravely. And that continues around the whole circle until everyone has had a chance to play that action card. And only the last person to have played bravely gets those rewards, the more increased rewards. And so I don't know, I just thought it was a really cool mechanic of like that risk of, well, what are other people going to do? And is someone else going to have chosen the same action, and so I should play shyly? Or no, this person, I'm pretty close to the end, and so I'm going to get the big rewards and play bravely.
So is it public whether or not it's whether or not you're playing brave or shy?
Yes. So what action cards you bring is private until after you so each round is just one action card, right? So if you did bring that action card, you can't do anything in that round and then it goes until every card is played.
Okay. Yeah. So. I think that most mechanics from most of the games could find a place in it. I'm struggling to picture that, to be honest, how that works.
In my head, I see it as a sort of scheme mini game where you do things, I'm doing air quotes. You can't see me doing air quotes, but you do things openly or you do things secretly. And when you do things secretly, you can definitely do them, and it's kind of tough because you're trying to do them in secret, so you get a little reward. But if you do them openly and brazenly, then someone else could be like, no, I'm doing the same thing and I'm going to outmaneuver you openly and brazenly. And so you don't get it much and I get to advance my scheme farther. Something like that.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
So that is that's like my one mechanic that I'm like, oh, I want to figure out how to get this in a game.
I'm Googling Broom Service now.
It's a very fun game. I do recommend it. I promise I'm not on their payroll.
Hey, this is Peter. I don't know if I'm coming through.
Yep.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Excuse me, let me back up here. So I posted a link to Deep Haven where it had a player-generated map, which I think is really cool. And there's a lot of stuff that you can do with the map that is not like having the map be static, right? Because geography is super important and it affects everything, right? And so there's all sorts of even stuff like the order, like in a Netrunner game, like the order of your cards matters and stuff like that. And I think that was reflected in Mirror Shades and Patty's new game and stuff like that. And that's all really cool stuff. One thing that I've done that I'm kind of proud of is just embody the world in the form of movement restrictions, which I am sure tons of other games have done, and I'd encourage those to if you know of any to give them a quick shout out in the chat or whatever. In Sickle we divided the room with tape on the floor, and then you could only cross the tape once per turn. So it really slowed down your movement, and it's not like you couldn't go anywhere, because you could also talk and hand things to other players across the tape. But once once you hand it to another player, it's in their hands, right? So you really have to kind of build up trust. Or you could spend the turn to like walk over and really do things yourself. So it creates all sorts of situations where it's like, well, I'm the leader of a country, so I don't really want to leave, but I need to influence the other end of the world. So how do I do that?
That's cool. Yeah, I had movement restrictions and tape on the floor. Everybody dies.
Oh, very cool. That's fun.
I like the idea of...
I wonder if I stole that from you, like subliminally.
I like the idea of being able to hand stuff across the tape, because I don't think I never explicitly said you couldn't, but I did say you could only talk to people in your area. So I think my restrictions are a little bit stricter than yours, but no, I do like movement restrictions at games, but I do know that they can be quite hard to enforce.
A lot easier online.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, it's you gotta have mechanics or diligence or moderators or very secure permissions for online movement restrictions, I feel. But yeah, it's people definitely accidentally cheat. That's definitely
yeah.
Yeah.
We've never found that they can last very long. You can try to impose as much as you can, but better to accept, I think, that you can't actually always guarantee that and design around that reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it worked pretty well when we did it, but that's really all I can say.
I was struck by your description of Trope High, actually, Becky, where you designed around that reality in terms of assuming that people would get rumours.
How do you mean?
Well, as they're walking around the floor, they overhear things.
Yes.
And you've assumed that that will happen, I think.
Yeah. Most mega games that I've been at, I've overheard things when I've been walking around the room, and that's been a really useful way to get information. So I think, yeah, at Trope I was assuming that people would do it, but I also put mechanics in place for people to get information from control and through other means if they weren't able to overhear things.
Right.
Cool. Anything else anyone wants to chat about?
Thank you so much, Becky. I think this is great just to start thinking about different ways of working with mega games and different incorporations of mechanics. I don't know if we always speak about those sort of unique variables that people have included in their games. So I really appreciate you giving this some thought and getting us to think about those things as people continue to design games. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope that I've given some sort of idea sparks somewhere.
Thank you.
You have. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great day. I hope to see you all a bit later today.